Pakistan is a country with great potential. Now, Pakistan, in my opinion, is ready. Right now is the best time for investors to come to our country.
Now, Pakistan's stock market is booming. Stock prices are at their highest level ever, and investments are pouring in.
Spending more than $50 billion on energy and infrastructure in Pakistan.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today I have a very special guest with me, Jorge Sebastiao. He's the CTO ecosystem of Huawei. And we're going to be discussing about the blockchain. Blockchain, everybody knows about it, especially from the tech sector, and how it provides the solution in different ways. But many people just know about this from the perspective of the cryptocurrency. But it has many applications in the government sector, in education sector, in healthcare, and all those we're going to be discussing it here today. But the really one element we're going to be focusing on, that the post-COVID, how is going to be applicable, how is going to really facilitate in different parts of different sectors, as I talked about, in terms of the healthcare, in terms of the education, and especially in the government sector. So let me ask George to, first of all, little bit give us his background, where has he been serving, what's his experience in terms of actually working in a telco sector for such a long time. And he's been one of the speakers in pretty much all our conferences. So I welcome you, George, here. And also a little bit, if you could tell a little bit about yourself in terms of what's your background, then so the viewers know how you have been spending your time lately.
Well, first, thank you, Kuram, for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Jorge Sebastiao. I'm a CTO and an advisor. I've been in IT for the last 35 years, and the last 25 has been in and around Middle East and Asia. I was in Huawei for the last 5.5 years as CTO, and now I've taken other CTO in one of the startups here in Bahrain. So I'm doing a lot of work in the area of blockchain for the last 4.5, 5 years. So it's been quite an exciting field. So I'm looking forward to spending the next little time with you and with the audience, and cover the topics that we discuss about, which is the current COVID-19 situation which we're in, where blockchain can help play a role, and how blockchain can go well beyond this in facilitating the evolving of the economy as it starts to come out from the current troubles that it finds itself in.
So, George, first of all, let's tell the viewers in terms of the actual blockchain aspect, because not many people actually know what the blockchain is. So let's just spend a couple of minutes on actually the technology itself. So my question would be, is very layman approach towards the blockchain.
Well, first, blockchain as a technology, it is seen to the world in the last 10, 11 years. However, blockchain as a concept has been around longer than over 10 years, closer to 20 years. It's just blockchain has been implemented as a manual system that was used to prevent tamper-proof without a centralized authority. But about a little bit over 10 years ago, the largest known use case of blockchain technology gave birth, and in this case, it's come to known today as Bitcoin, which came actually as part of the last financial disruption that we had with collapse of several organizations like Lehman's and Enron and so on. So it was designed to provide an alternative to the current financial system and establishing a new medium of trust. But blockchain as a technology over the last 10 years has evolved quite tremendously, certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, more specifically with evolving into different generations of the technology, and certainly with the birth of what we get to know today as, or we know as, enterprise blockchain. I do have a few slides that later on we can go over that cover some of these topics. But you have to look at blockchain as a technology of trust that enables you to basically share value or transfer value between individuals or organizations without necessarily the need for a central authority. And it allows you to do this in a complete trusted environment, protected environment.
Okay, so George, I mean, if we look at it from that perspective, and we knew that there are many applications, I mean, pre-COVID, but now the situation is like entirely different. I mean, we see there is political changes happening, especially people are talking about the new Cold War is going to be starting soon. In fact, when we actually look around, that's going to be happening. That is happening, actually. The new financial systems we are talking about, that the world is going to probably unpeg from the dollar. China is emerging from purely very different sort of scenario. And I'm just trying to actually look at it from the perspective that while the world is fighting over just the 5G, that I mean, you are based there in the Middle East, where UAE government has actually taken Huawei as the partner, and they're going to be installing, and China is actually increasing its footprint in the corporate sector in the Middle East as well. How you see that post-COVID, how is going to evolve from the blockchain perspective?
Well, first, I do believe that blockchain as a technology, and as I mentioned to you before, as a technology of trust, is going to play a quite tremendous role. It's going to play a role in actually several areas. It's going to play a role of allowing you to establish trust between organizations and to transfer assets. It allows you to establish, for example, touchless or contactless transfers of payments, which, especially in this post-COVID world, is going to be quite important. It also allows you to facilitate the establishment of what we call today as neobanks or digital banks. As you know, in Europe and US, these banks have taken quite a lot of hold, and they have developed quite well. However, in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, there's very few startups that actually cover these topics. So I do see blockchain playing an extremely important role in creating this new generation of digital financial institutions that also at the same time support things like Islamic principles, which are in some cases complementary, but also more conservative and different than the ones that we sometimes see in the financial institutions in the West, in the sense that they try to minimize the amount of risk and maximize the amount of collaboration. So I do believe that although blockchain in itself is going to play an important role, it is going to be not the only technology. Blockchain needs to cooperate with other technologies, of course 5G being one of them, AI, IoT, machine learning are also going to be extremely important in working or co-working with blockchain to actually develop this new generation of applications that enable basically digital or contactless digital innovation.
So, I mean, one thing related to when you say actually is going to be co-working with other technologies, but at the same time, we see that certain technologies has got certain control by some organizations. Like, for instance, now we see that, certain organizations were leading the AI element of things. Like, for instance, Google were, IBM was, you would have like Dr. Watson, you would have TensorFlow by the Google. Several other companies are developing their own platforms, and especially when we talk about the blockchain, obviously Hyperledger is one of those, which is Microsoft developed by that. But then on the other hand, that was the sort of control, you can say, or the developed by those organizations. Whereas when we see the 5G, Huawei took the lead and it came up with this option to provide it to rest of the world. How the blockchain is going to evolve? Would every single company would have their own platform to facilitate, or is going to just be primarily Microsoft is going to be actually leading that to provide wider variety of people or the organizations?
Well, there are several important elements that are worth noting. First, blockchain is primarily an open source movement driven. So in the sense that the code and the development of blockchain is basically shared across various organizations and individuals. So not a single point of control on a given technology. However, yes, we will have different types of blockchain technologies. We will have private and public blockchain technologies. That really means if we're talking about things like, for example, very sensitive applications like government, national security, or others, those will primarily be conducted in private or enterprise blockchain solutions. Where some of the others that actually require a higher degree interoperability and being able to reach individuals across the world, then public blockchains will actually make much more sense. One has to note that the two are actually not mutually exclusive. You can actually combine both in the sense that you can have a combination of private and public blockchains, or some elements of data are kept in private blockchains or public. And even in the context of public blockchains, we can actually store private information for the simple reason that the information that might be contained in that public blockchain but is of a sensitive nature, we can actually encrypt and we can protect using private keys. That really means that although the information is being stored and shared across public blockchains, the contents of the sensitive information will actually not be visible to everyone. So only the information that is of a public nature will actually be visible to everyone. The nice aspect about blockchain is the fact that the information cannot be deleted. That really means the information gets linked and added to the end of the chain. So this enables to establish a much higher degree of trust and a much higher degree of transparency. And this certainly is going to help countries in the region of the Middle East, countries in Africa and Asia, where sometimes, not only, but corruption plays a very bad role in business transactions. So that really means blockchain will help and assist in eliminating some of the elements of corruption by giving transparency to the transactions as they get executed.
So for instance, a lot of data has been generated. Like, for instance, I've recently seen it's a space out application. And I think this would be the way forward in terms of like post-COVID. So for instance, I can go to the map and look at the Singapore and see what are the places where it's not crowded. For instance, all of the malls have got like this check-in system where it can actually track where a certain number of people are going to be actually filling the place. or there's enough capacity. So before you actually plan your trip to do your shopping, you see that on the map, and it's a countrywide map. So it's very easy for Singapore to actually implement something like that, or Dubai probably would be able to actually do that next. So you'll get to see all that data coming up or getting generated. But then also it has some security implications. So how would the blockchain be one of the actual contender in order to make sure that that's going to be all spread out and it's going to be very hard to break?
Well, actually, there's several elements that are quite critical in this COVID area that we actually live in. One is what we typically know as contact tracing. So contact tracing as a technology has been developed by several organizations, at least 2 or 3 that I have been assisting in the Middle East, and they have built those into their mobile applications. That has enabled them to deliver these applications to governments and enabling if there is proximity of individuals that were infected and you came in contact with them, that you can actually be notified of the potential risk to you. The important elements about this contact tracing is that they're so important that the organizations that actually are the most popular today in creating the physical mobiles, that means Apple or the iPhone and the Android ecosystem, have actually embedded this technology into the native operating system. So this allows kind of an opt-in approach towards this. Of course, blockchain can help to protect the data associated with this contact tracing. The second element that you mentioned that is extremely important is what we sometimes refer to as social distancing. And social distancing until a solution to COVID is found, meaning a vaccine or some level of immunization of the population, social distancing is going to be remaining with us in our daily lives when we actually leave our homes. And so that really means in places, public places like shopping centers, malls, when we travel in airports or others. This social distancing is going to play an important role. And of course, countries like the Middle East, Bahrain, UAE, with Dubai, and others have been leading, and Singapore, of course, in the creation of this new generation of applications that are mobile-driven and enable to facilitate both the contact tracing as well as the social distancing, and those at the same time minimize the risk of potential infection to the population.
Now, that is one area, and we're going to be actually exploring further that how it's going to actually facilitate that. But another thing politically is happening now that, as I referred before, in terms of the geopolitical situation is emerging because of all this, pandemic has affected countries economically and is severely affecting many countries. I mean, Europe and America badly affected. And the new powers are emerging in this. And many of, the people in the financial sector, especially thinking from this point of view that, yes, this probably could have happened in 10 years' time or like 7 to 10 years' time. But now, because of this pandemic, the process has gone a lot faster in terms of coming up with the cryptocurrency or any other currency other than dollar, and see how it's going to ultimately drive the world economy. And if that happens, would that be still another paper currency, or in your opinion, it would the crypto would be the serious contender for that?
Well, first, that is quite important that cryptocurrencies are a facilitator to actually enhance the acceleration of the economic engine. So that really means it helps you to, for example, finance startups or crowdfunding startups through governments or through individuals or other organizations. It can help us, for example, with real estate. So as you know, real estate requires substantial funds to actually initiate the development of buildings or sometimes complete cities. So blockchain is one of the technologies, along with cryptocurrencies, to actually enable this through digitization of these assets. So which enables us both to people participate in these assets. Governments can also benefit from these technologies by allowing them to actually fund infrastructure projects like roads or bridges or others. But first, let's start with one type of cryptocurrencies. We have things like, for example, Bitcoin, which is primarily a store of value that was created a little bit over 10 years ago, and it was designed to be independent of governments and so on. We had Facebook that tried with Libra, but of course with their basket of currencies were not very successful in their version 1.0, so they came back with version 2.0 to avoid the potential issues that they had from the various governments. That really means that today's governments are also looking at their own national cryptocurrencies as digitized version of the currencies. Several countries, especially in the Caribbean, have already implemented these capabilities. So small countries have led the way. But now we have large countries examining the usage of this technology. Yes, we have China that is doing pilots in this area. We have Russia that is actually studying this for the Russian bloc of countries. And we have also the United States that has also looked at this technology to facilitate the deployment and the usage of their own currency as well. One has to keep in mind that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin remain independent of government, although they, of course, need to live in the real world, so they will be affected by the ups and downs of the economic downturns. They can sometimes be an edge against inflation, but not always. However, the digitization of the existing currencies that we have, like the dollar or Chinese yuan or others, will enable you to have a digital society. So that means you no longer need to carry cash with you. So that means your wallet will be a digital one. So it'll be probably the mobile or a browser that you may use from time to time. So that really means that you'll be able to have touchless and contactless payments much more easily implemented, which actually also helps us greatly in this existing COVID-19 situation, as some people have figured out that the money that we use today, the paper money, can actually be used to obviously transfer some of the infections, because some of the particles associated with the virus could be transported in this money. So by having contactless payments or touchless payments, that means we are actually helping the livelihood of all the individuals that need to do financial transactions every day. So whether you happen to go to the groceries or you go do a deposit or withdrawal on an ATM machine, so you no longer need to go to this ATM machine to actually lead that. It really means that even the institutions that we have seen in the past, like the traditional banking and financial institutions, are going to be slowly replaced by digital ones. So we have close to about 80 different projects around the world today, about 40 in Europe, about what we call digital banks, also known as neobanks. These are financial institutions that do not have the traditional bricks and mortar. Actually, the important aspect about this is that these virtual organizations will enable to provide the same or most of the financial services that we actually use today. And you'll be able to use these services with just a few clicks. The standard today, or the lowest, is about 24 clicks. That really means with 24 clicks, you can actually open an account in one of these organizations and actually start using them for digital contactless payments. So this contrasts very much with the traditional financial institutions that we have today, that sometimes require multiple visits to this financial institution to deliver many documents until finally the account is actually open when we can make the first transaction with a plastic card.
That's a great point. I didn't think of that from this point of view. I mean, obviously, this is becoming quite, issue in terms of actually transmitting the disease when it comes to COVID. And the less contact we have, the less possibility is going to be actually spreading the virus. So that would be a way forward. I think our whole life is 360 degrees changing. I mean, the way we are communicating with each other is another element, that the whole social
That's correct.
element.
And yeah, especially in Pakistan, where you are, you quickly realize that digital banks are non-existent today. So that means this is an extremely a great opportunity. So I'm not just referring to digital banks, I'm referring to digital Islamic banks, so that not only provide digital services, but also address the financial requirements of the Muslim population as well.
Right. And I mean, we're going to have like a very detailed session. I briefly touched upon in my previous sessions about the Islamic banking, because right now the whole scenario, especially with the SMEs, we actually did touch upon this point that, in Pakistan especially, there is, you cannot actually get the loan, you cannot actually get the, credit financing, primarily because this is all collateral based. You have to have a collateral in terms of actually getting the, the new loans. What government actually facilitated that. In the West, it didn't happen. In West, in Europe and America, basically they given those packages and said, here you go, you take it, you need it the most. But in Pakistan, although they actually announced it, but the companies who do not have the collateral, especially the IT companies, they cannot actually come up with something asset-based financing. And that's where it comes in, the actual, Islamic banking. And it's a huge topic. I mean,
it's actually the amazing part about Islamic banking is that Islamic banking functions like a cooperative.
Right.
So that means both the individual that is taking the loan and the people that are investing the money in the loan are cooperating together, co-op, to actually achieve the goal, and both get the rewards associated with the positive results. Yes, I do agree that in some areas Pakistan is lagging behind, but there's some other areas where Pakistan has been extremely successful, and I would like to see potentially a full digitization of this success, which will expand it even further, is what I call microloans. You have Akawat, which is a group based out of Lahore, which has gone from delivering $100 loans without any collateral to actually today disbursing millions of dollars to small businesses that require money to actually enable to purchase items that they need to actually execute their business. One interesting aspect about this microfinancing and micro loans is that the return is 99.99%, which means most of the people actually return the money that was actually loaned to them. So that really means that it has been extremely successful in helping those individuals succeed in the aspirations they're trying to do. I would like to see increased digitization of this microfinancing to make it even more accessible. That means anybody in Pakistan with a mobile and a digital wallet will enable to participate in this microfinancing, either as providing the financing or getting the benefits of this financing, and thus allowing a much faster adoption of this system and allowing it to progress even further.
So while you mentioned Akhuwat, Amjad Saqib is the chairman and founder of the actual organization. He actually contracted coronavirus a couple of days ago, and he's currently isolating. So I pray that he recovers very soon. It's a great work they have done, and now they have reaching to the level that they have spent billions of rupees and loans, and you rightly said it's 99.99% recovery rate. So that's an amazing example, shown to the world. that can actually work. I have a question here, although we briefly touched upon this. Zainab says, sir, how blockchain industry offers computational trust for tracking the coronavirus outbreaks. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, there has been a couple of contract tracing applications that have been deployed and are being tested across several governments. I am aware of at least 3 of them that are developed by colleagues of mine, and this has enabled them to succeed in this approach. One is known as Avantas, and another one is known as Accubits, and they've been quite successful in promoting of this technology. A third colleagues, also in the Middle East, are working on this technology to further advance and enhance the capabilities of these existing systems. Because one has to look at blockchain as a gigantic cloud computing environment. So each node of the blockchain basically enables the processing of these nodes or miners to provide their computing power to enable the trust of these transactions to actually take place. So they play an extremely important role. But there's a few other things that I would like to highlight. Although we have so far concentrated primarily on financial aspects and medical ones, blockchain as a technology post-COVID-19 can help many other verticals to also flourish much better. One is the identity management vertical, where national ID programs or identification for performing any transactions are extremely important. So today we have a whole new generation of what we call blockchain 5.0, like Relictum, that support above 1 million transactions per second and are very good for things like biometric identification being performed in real time. The other important elements that I see blockchain playing an important role are in the educational field. So one of the key elements that we have seen as part of this big COVID is all the existing schools have gone digital. So that really means there are some elements that still remain to be digitized to be effective. The cooperation between all the students and having the appropriate ecosystem. So we have a few of our colleagues like Atrom Gate that is actually doing substantial work in Switzerland on this technology and deploying them in various countries around the world, like for example, Italy, as well as Brazil and others. So blockchain can play an extremely important role in the educational field in enhancing the education that is being provided, but also at the same time ensuring things like, for example, degrees and the ecosystem that cooperates together are actually fully verified. As you know, today in the educational field, we have a lot of fake degrees, which leads to substantial problems as well. The other important areas that I think are quite notable are in the areas of what I would call supply chain. We have quite a few interesting applications that have been done in this area as well.
Actually, I have a question. It's quite a long one, but we're going to try to actually cover that, and that's where the supply chain comes in. But before I do that, you know, two of the areas, like two of the sectors, is going to be really, post-COVID, is going to be, everybody is going to be jumping on it. One is obviously the healthcare we touched upon, and the second one is the food. Everybody's looking at the agriculture. They want to be actually secure. They want to secure the food supply chain. And what Rashid is talking about is, while we discuss about the improved health facility, we should improve food safety standards across the food supply chain, e.g. fresh produce, dairy and poultry, etc. By using blockchain technology, IoT and AI, altogether can transform entire food supply chain to mitigate the food wastage issues and all that. Now, when it comes to the food supply chain, I mean, even in the Western countries, like developed nations, we haven't seen IoT is being used to an extent to that level that we can actually see. Most recently, we have seen a lot of milk has been wasted because there were the facilities were not running their normal operations to kind of pasteurize it. And there are many other examples. So
Yes,
please,
yes, in the area of supply chain, this is extremely important. I do have an extremely good colleague, Chris Fernandez from Block Gemini in UAE, that operates across several countries, that has done one of the leading applications in this supply management. Obviously, supply management is extremely important for many aspects. One is to ensure that the integrity of the supply chain, which really means that from the point that you have a good that is being produced to the point that that good is being delivered to a user, he is fully ensured with the authenticity of this good. And this applies not just to the food, but it applies also to medication. As you know, we have lots of fake impersonated food, and have also lots of impersonated medication, which can be quite dangerous to the patients as well. The second aspect about logistics is also as important as the tracing itself, which that means that blockchain can help you optimize the relationship from an entire supply chain. The third element that blockchain plays an important role in this supply chain is in the negotiation of the supplier and supplyee contracts. Today, when you do supply chain, this is administered by a lot of paper contracts. One of the things that came up with blockchain 2.0 and higher blockchains, up to blockchain 5.0, which we have today, is what we call smart contract capabilities. That really means the rules by which a contract is created and is driven can be automatically implemented in that blockchain. So instead of having paper contracts, now we have digital contracts. Now, what is the implication in this supply chain? When we implement smart contracts in supply chain management, we save substantial amounts of dollars in the operation of that supply chain. That really means when less goods get delivered or more goods get delivered as part of the original contract, the smart contract will automatically adjust the payments between the supplier and the person that gets delivered the goods. And this gets done in a completely automated way and transparent way. You have to keep in mind that both parties actually sign with their private key, which makes the contracts authentic and completely automated while they remain active. So it is an extremely efficient technology in automating the rules that drive the contracts. And this applies a lot to the supply chain. Of course, there's other applications as well, but supply chain is definitely one of them.
So basically, another one I have here in terms of actually, the governmental sector. Now, government is talking about revamping some of their systems, and some disbursement happened in terms of, handouts. And we have seen handouts in those countries even, which hasn't done it historically or couldn't even afford to do it. Yes, you could see that in Europe and especially happen in America now. But countries like Pakistan or some of the developing countries also actually did that, give some sort of amount to those people who could actually survive for like a month or couple months on that amount. Now, that was a huge undertaking, not just on the financial side, but also at the logistical side, that how to actually provide them that money. And as you rightly said, when the actual cash handling gets involved, there is a lot more chances to actually pass on that disease or the virus to other people. But at the same time, because the facilitation wasn't available, they had to rely on some banks. Now, we did discuss that in our previous conversations on this particular point, that if there was a case that every person would have like on their phone, because now the smartphone penetration in Pakistan even is about 2/3 of the population has the smartphone. So it could be some, wallet that you download it on your phone, and here you go, you have like 12,000 rupees or $100 in your wallet.
Actually, this technology was presented last year at the World Economic Forum. I had the chance to visit it in Davos last year and actually did 4 presentations. But one specific of these solutions was the one that was actually used for the Syrian refugees. Why is this important? So we had refugees because of a war consideration and disruption in the country, and people were trying to give to these refugees a certain amount of money to allow them to buy food or simply to survive. Now, when we talk about money, and this money gets distributed by international organizations, by the time this money reaches the individual that is designed to receive this money, many times there is leakages, corruption and others play an important role. So that really means maybe you send $1 million, but only $100,000 actually gets it to the end destination. So blockchain here, again, plays an extremely important role for 2 factors. One, it reduces the overall cost of delivering these funds to the target individuals, in this case, the Syrian refugees. Second thing, you actually have in a transparent way that the end user or the individual will actually needed those funds actually receive them through their individual wallets. And then they were able to use these wallets to actually purchase goods like food or other essential elements they may need, like medication. So this completely transparent way, on one side, makes the transfer instant, makes the transfer without middlemen, and much more frictionless, meaning that the chance for corruption in this entire system, because there's no more any intermediaries. There's the organization which actually provides the funds, and there's the individual who receives the funds. And this makes the whole system much better and much more efficient. The same thing obviously can be applied in Pakistan as well.
So, I mean, then comes the question, in your experience, and this is very pertinent because we are here, I mean, we've been presenting all these options and technologists are always discussing all these things, that this can be done or that can be done. And it could have been done very easily. Why don't the governments actually adopt it quickly?
That is actually a very good question. I've been visiting Pakistan for the last 25 years. And certainly I have seen a big change in the willingness of politicians to actually help the average citizen. I would say in the past, politicians were always seen as some people that we sometimes put in pedestal and not reachable or accessible. But today's politicians are much different. Many are younger. Many are also come from the understanding of the average user because they have directly interfaced with them on a regular basis. That really means they are trying to put in place these new systems. However, some of these new politicians are not always technical people or necessarily understand the capabilities of these new technologies. So in this case, they have put together a few task forces to actually speed up and increase the speed of implementation of these new technologies. But I always like to mention one thing. Technology by itself does not solve the problem. See, the problem of really requires 3 important elements. One is the platform, which is the technology. The second one is the ecosystem, all the key stakeholders that need to participate. And finally, the end user. So any kind of system that you put in place needs to be simple, very user-friendly. So only once you have these 3 elements in place, which is platform, ecosystem, and addressing the needs of the end user, will actually we achieve critical mass of any solution that you have. If you're missing any of those 3 elements, you're always going to have a hard time, what I would sometimes refer to as user adoption. And any kind of user adoption is critical to the success of any solution that has to be in place. The final end user needs to be comfortable with the solution, needs to be able to trust the solution, and then have accessibility to this solution. And if that happens, then magic happens.
So, George, another element, So Salman is saying that governments are afraid. What's your opinion? Afraid of corrupt, that they won't get the share?
Well, that's actually a good thing. Many politicians, especially the more traditional ones, have their own way of doing things. They have their own network. We sometimes call it the old boys network. So this is the way they have become used to doing business. They pick up the phone or they interact with the people they trust. All of a sudden, you have a whole new technology that disrupts the way they do things. So that means on one side, they feel the loss of control because they are no longer in charge of every element that is part of the solution. But this is the beauty of it. That means you actually distribute the implementation of the solution, so you can reach much more people in a much faster way.
Now, in terms of the, we haven't discussed much about the actual food supply chain. So another question from Rashid that I would like to add more in terms of the food security and food safety challenges. Now, just to share a little bit about the actual food supply chain in Pakistan, there are two elements recently happened in Pakistan. One was the actual sugar was supply. There's an inquiry open, and there's a lot of subsidy is being given to their very chosen people. And the other one was the wheat shortage, that wheat was exported without realizing that there's going to be need in the country. Now, those two major inquiries are happening right now in the government. And they're like, the fallouts of that could probably destabilize the whole government itself. How to deal with this whole situation?
Well, I am not a politician, and I don't certainly aspire to be one, and I would probably stay away from those. But definitely, I do believe that the technology can play a role in addressing the transparency and solving some of these problems. But some of the decisions of whether to subsidize or not to subsidize, which is basically to protect certain industries, these are political decisions, not technology ones. And they need to be done in conjunction with the individuals from the various constituencies, like the regions of government and so on. And based on that, they need to be implemented. I can only speak of something I've been aware of for many years in Canada, which is, for example, milk. Milk in Canada, very similar, I guess, to your situation of sugar and wheat, was highly protected by having only certain quantities were allowed to be sold, so prices were maintained at a certain level to ensure that the agriculture could actually be profitable for the individuals that did that. But this obviously led also to a lot of wastage. So that really means a lot of milk and cheese ended up being thrown away, where that same milk and cheese could have been given to individuals which are starving or definitely needed these goods. One has to have the proper balance between the needs of profit and the needs of helping the society as a whole. Different people in the society have different needs. So the modern politicians of today have to be very sensitive to that and being able to address this in an efficient way. What technology enables them to do is to have access to the information to make these decisions. Technology does not make decisions for you, but it gives you the capability of informing you the quickest possible of potential troubles through statistics and big data. So big data gives you information about, is your population getting sick? Is your population starving? Because a lot of this information can easily be found through things like Google searches and others. So you have had notice of any impending problems before they actually occur. So that means if the politicians use this data to make the right decisions, then this empowers them to be more successful in the future. But the technology as it exists will never be able to make the decisions for them. And this is actually quite important, because one of the technologies that I get involved a lot is not just a blockchain, is AI. And many people have come to say that AI is a dangerous technology because it replaces humans. No, I believe AI should not be designed to replace humans. AI should be used as a co-pilot technology. That really means AI is designed to assist individuals to perform their daily jobs better than they did before. Whether you happen to be driving a car, whether you are a doctor, that you're looking at an X-ray or a digital image and you need to make a decision what is the right kind of treatment that you must give this patient. So the assistant provided by AI will help these professional individuals, including the politicians, to actually make better and faster decisions on their everyday lives.
Now, one important point, we are in the last 10 minutes of the actual session. I just want to touch upon this IoT element, we can say to an extent, or the tagging side of it. Now, yes, blockchain could be the system on which like this whole supply chain is going to be actually managed, and it's going to be all foolproof and not much, tinkering can be done with that. Now, major issue is when you actually, the asset actually moves from one location to another, we rely on the human intervention in that. So you do not have this element. Doesn't matter how good is that, doesn't matter whether you actually bring in the blockchain-based platform, but the real human tinkering can be done. Blockchain is only safe till the point when the data is being entered. But the point the data is entering, that's where it could be like some tinkering can be done. Now, in your experience from the rest of the world,
Yes.
is there any system in place in the world where the actual asset-based tracking can be done with the food items?
Okay, let's backtrack a little bit. Since being involved in IT for the last 35 years, there is one terminology that is very important in IT, and it remains true to this date. And that means garbage in, garbage out. IT is very good at dealing with information. Blockchain gives you the trust element associated with this information. But the information that gets put into the system still needs to be the right information, and that is done by individuals. Yes, you can automate some of that, because if you have a RFID tag or IoT device, you automate some of the entry of that information, so you reduce the amount of error that could result from the data entry. You can use scanning of barcodes. There's a whole multitude of technologies. But once that data gets entered and gets validated and put into the blockchain, that means it becomes much less likely that it gets tampered. But this is only at the data entry point. Your point is correct in the sense the data moves along, or the asset moves along. And by the way, this is not just for food. This applies also for real estate assets. Let's take the example. You have a building, you tokenize it, you issue the tokens for the building, and people invest in those tokens as owning that asset, whether that happens to be food or real estate or any other asset. You have full tracking. However, maybe 3 months, 6 months down the road, the food perishes or disappears, or the building gets destroyed or is not maintained properly. You need to be able to reflect this information again back into the system. This is not an automated process. You need to have the right processes in place with any solution that you have to ensure that this actually happens. That really means several elements other than technology need to play an important role. One is what I sometimes call governance. So any kind of solution that you need to put in place need to have the right governance framework to ensure that the information is maintained accurately. And even with all these elements in place, one important element, always very important in IT, is what I usually call trust but verify. This comes from my cybersecurity background. That really means for you to ensure the accuracy again of the information, it is always important to do third-party audits. That really means the information that is put or maintained in the system at periodic intervals, and again, that depends on the frequency of the system, could be daily, could be monthly, could be semi-annually or even annually. You need to have an independent auditor, not associated with the primary executor of that information, that validates and rubber stamps that that information still remains accurate as it is being represented in the trusted database, in this case, the blockchain. So it's only once you have these two elements working together that you can actually achieve full trust in the system. Without these last elements of governance and third-party validation or auditing, the system is or remains prone to deficiencies in the validity of the data over time.
Thanks. That very well answers that. George, one more thing. Now, you have these laws are kind of like being implemented, especially in Europe, if you look at it. And there are many other countries going to be a lot more protective. So even going to that extent, because cloud is everywhere. So when you look at it, that your data is going to be residing in some location, yes, you know where your server is placed in the cloud. But when the European community says that you cannot actually store a data of those particular people you are actually serving outside of Europe, then how you deal with this kind of situation? Because in the blockchain, I mean, do we know exactly where our bits and pieces of the data is going to be residing at a particular location? And that data is also geographically is in that vicinity. So how you deal with that?
Okay, that is actually a very good question. One of the things that Europe implemented a few years ago, about 3 years or so, was called GDPR, which is primarily about protecting confidentiality of the information. GDPR allows for very substantial punishment for the organizations or governments that actually don't comply with the rules and the regulations. And although this is actually an European regulation, it applies for systems that go much beyond Europe's borders because the citizens travel free around the world. As it applies specifically to blockchain, we mentioned before that we have different types of blockchain. We can have private and public blockchains. When we have public blockchains, typically the nodes or the miners that actually operate the blockchain tend to be situated all over the world. So today, for example, the Bitcoin network is across hundreds of countries around the world, and not one single country, although sometimes in this case China had at one stage a majority of the miners. That is no longer the case. So you have a not evenly distribution, but a widely distribution. This prevents potential tampering with running of the nodes. In the context of a private blockchain, you choose where the nodes are actually going to be. So for example, if you're running a Hyperledger-based solution, you need a minimum of 3 nodes to actually be able to run the solution, and the information gets replicated across these 3 nodes. But these 3 nodes can remain within the borders of the country. Now, you can do this also in an extremely creative way. That means you want to have redundancy and safety in this information. So some countries, what they have done, they have decided to implement some of the nodes in the international embassies that they have. So this allows them to have a highly distributed network to ensure the safety and the real value of the blockchain, while at the same time ensuring that the data actually remains within the borders of the country. Yes, we have today in the cloud environment that we operate today, borders are an extremely important element for what we call sensitive data for the country. Now, what is considered sensitive is basically defined uniquely by each country. But in most countries, that applies to things like, for example, financial information, certain, not all, but most of it, telecommunications information, government or government agencies information, medical information, and so on. Where others, like for example, education or others, can easily be accessible and rendered public.
Okay, thanks, George. That answers that, and it didn't cross my mind in terms of like actually sensitive data hosting in your embassies. That could be very.
It's a nice compromise. See, one of the nice things about IT is about innovation and creativity. So you always have to think outside the box. So the solution is not always in the book. So most people tend to do what I call cut and paste. They see the solution in the book and they implement it in real life. No, in reality, you need to step back, to do a little bit of brainstorming, and you need to use creativity. And when you combine smart people creativity with the problems that are being solved, you achieve the best solution possible.
Okay, George, one last question, and then Andreas is here. So let's see what he says. Are there any solutions out there to use AI as the auditor tool, and does it add value?
Actually, yes, there is quite a lot of various tools that have been done. AI, again, I believe in AI as a co-pilot, but not as a complete replacement for humans. I can give you one example, and this example actually applies to blockchain. As you know, in blockchain, we have something known as smart contracts. So smart contracts are the rules or the code that you use to implement the rules. Because they are code, there's problems, there's bugs. Typically, there's a bug for every 1,000 lines of code, or a serious bug for every 10,000 lines of code. Now, it is very cumbersome for somebody to actually go through every single line of code to identify potential problems or bugs in the code. So today, there's AI systems that help you validate the most common problems against that code. And this is basically AI systems. They are AI code inspectors. Now, does it mean because you took a smart contract and you validated it using AI system, now this smart contract is actually perfect? No. AI system maybe will remove 90 or 95% of the problems, but the remaining 5% needs the attentive attention of a qualified individual to go line by line and try to identify the problem and the solution to that problem.
Okay, Andres, that was the answer. And one last question, can we connect ad hoc networks with the blockchain network?
Actually, this is very important. One of the big problems that actually exists today, definitely in the blockchain, is standards and interoperability. So today, this merging of various networks and blockchain is extremely important, even between blockchains themselves, but certainly with blockchains and the existing systems that we have already in place. Sometimes we also refer to this as on-chain and off-chain. Because of performance considerations with older blockchains, a lot of the work had to be done off-chain rather than on-chain so that you meet the end-user service requirements. But today with blockchain 5.0, you can achieve a good percentage of these transactions on-chain. But that really means that tomorrow you're not going to replace all the existing systems that we have today by blockchain ones, but they will cooperate together. So having the integration points between those two is extremely important. And the gentleman that you talked about earlier, Andreas, actually does tremendous amount of work in this area. He is doing a lot of work in terms of integrating and providing the pipes that allow you to integrate the outer world systems with blockchain, or to integrate various blockchain systems disparate that do not cooperate to allow them to actually cooperate together.
Okay, so that's sort of like ending the session here, but Teresa actually sent another message, so let's quickly see it. Can you not just tell what Pakistan needs to do? You are talking about not telling us the real answers. Now, in this conversation, I don't know whether we can come up with all the answers or not.
See, I unfortunately, I am not the right person for the answer that. I think that answer needs to be given to your prime minister. I think he's an individual, extremely capable, and he's right. He's got the country at heart, and I think that question should be posed to him. I am only providing the means to make his job easier, but definitely I cannot do his job.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, this conference is all about, finding solutions. So Invest in Pakistan, there's going to be a lot of content from June 12th to 15th. So we're going to be actually discussing a lot of things, but we cannot actually implement those. We can actually provide the solutions, as George rightly said. Any last words before we go, George?
No, thank you very much for the hospitality. And although these times have been extremely challenging during this COVID-19, it's actually been the most busiest times of my life as I zoom in and zoom out of various events, trying to assist all my colleagues like yourself and across other countries, while at the same time doing my daily job as well.
Thanks, George, for all this time you've taken out. And it was a great conversation. I mean, really loved it.
I enjoyed very much, and no need for any slides.
So we're going to be actually doing a major one. We would need a keynote speech from you as well, so we can actually bring in those slides during the conference. So next weekend is going to be very busy weekend. So let's see how it goes. But thank you very much.
Looking forward.
Thank you. So guys, that was the session. And basically, I definitely think that we had a great conversation, and I'm sure like you would have loved it. There are many areas we actually covered in this, and we're going to be doing a lot more conversation, and George is going to dig down deep into the actual technical elements of it during the conference from June 12th to June 15th, and then wait for it. So until then, until the next session, which is going to be happening in a few hours, where we are discussing how the startup's going to ultimately get the funding, and how can they go about actually raising funds, which is going to be happening in roughly, I think, about 4 or 5 hours. So keep tuning in. Until that, मुझे इजाजत चाहिए होगी आपसे इंशाल्लाह अगले 4 से 5 घंटों में फिर आपसे मिलते हैं इंशाल्लाह. अल्लाह हाफिज़. अस्सलाम वालेकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू.
On this massacre of school children in Pakistan.
You think we are a nation who is only known for terrorism, but you're not aware that we own it when it comes to optimism. You can keep on thinking of the odds and stay in fright, or you can trust the facts you're about to witness by sight. We're not the troublemakers that the world think we are. We have achieved a lot that is enough to remove this scar. Let's start believing that our economy holds great potential, and step forward to explore the prospects, cause that's essential. We're not just a remarkable marks present only in the past. Instead, we still hold potential to show the world we're blessed. We were an economy who was followed by others. We got shattered a bit, but stood again to aim for treasures. We made mistakes, faced the consequences, and suffered. This taught us a lot and enabled us to keep ourselves covered. We moved hills, gained titles, and made many other records. Our nation survived the turmoil and made its way through hazards. How can you doubt a nation who doesn't give up at any cost? Pakistan always come back on track when the world think it's lost. We're tough, skilled, talented, and unstoppable. You can check the stats to see how much we're capable. No matter you are national, regional, or international investor, our country has so much to offer. You just name the sector. We're coming forward with the conference of the year. Will you amiably join hands with us and provide your share?